Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a case that's not only bone, chilling, but also a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. We're talking about the infamous Green River Killer, a name that sent shivers down the spines of an entire nation. Have you ever heard of this case? Let me know in the comments if it rings a bell, and buckle up, because this is a story that will stay with you. Picture this, the Pacific Northwest, 1980s. A seemingly peaceful landscape, but a sinister shadow is spreading. Young women, often vulnerable, living on the fringes of society, are vanishing. Their bodies are found near the Green River. Hence the chilling moniker given to their unseen predator. Imagine the terror, the uncertainty, the sheer panic that gripped the community. Can you even fathom what it was like to live under that constant threat? In this video, we're going to piece together the terrifying puzzle of the Green River Killer. We'll follow the investigation's twists and turns, the agonizing near misses, and explore the haunting question. How did one man evade capture for so long while leaving such a devastating trail of victims? Get ready to journey a dark chapter of true crime history. And I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts and theories in the comments throughout the video. Let's unravel this mystery together. Part 2. The Green River Killer in a Reign of Terror unfolds. Welcome back, everyone. We've laid the groundwork, introduced the chilling specter of the Green River Killer, and now we're plunging deep into the abyss, into the very heart of his terrifying reign. We're stepping back in time to the early 1980s to witness the genesis of a series of horrific tragedies that would forever scar the Pacific Northwest and leave an indelible mark on the annals of true crime. The first waving, the summer of 1982, where it all began. Our dark journey begins with a name, a young life tragically cut short. Wendy Lee Caulfield, only 16 years old. Try to picture her. A teenager on the verge of adulthood, brimming with dreams, hopes, and the promise of a future that would never be realized. On that fateful day, July 15th, 1982, her lifeless body was discovered in the murky waters of the Green River. This wasn't just a tragic death. It was the chilling overture, the opening act of a serial predator's horrifying performance. Imagine the scene, the flashing lights of police cars reflecting on the water's surface, the somber faces of investigators, the dawning realization that something truly evil was at play. What thoughts, what fears do you think raced through the minds of those first responders as they arrived at that desolate riverbank? Share your reflections in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested in your perspectives. The discovery of Wendy's body sent shockwaves through the community, a ripple of fear that would soon turn into a tidal wave of terror. Because the horror was far from over, in fact, it was just the beginning of a macabre sequence that would haunt the region for years to come. Within weeks, the Green River yielded more victims, each discovery more horrifying than the last Gizzle Lovern, 17, found on July 17, 1982. Her life extinguished just days after Wendy's. Debra Bonner, 23, found on August 12, 1982. Another young life added to the grim tally. Marcia Chapman, 31, found on August 15, 1982, the horror intensifying with each new victim. Opal Mills, 16, also found on August 15, 1982, discovered mere hours and a short distance from Marcia Chapman, a chilling testament to the killer's audacity. Each of these women had a name, a story, a life filled with loved ones, aspirations,
and dreams.
They weren't mere statistics. They were daughters, sisters, friends, individuals whose lives were brutally extinguished. The sheer savagery of these crimes, the fact that all these victims were found in such close proximity, both geographically and temporally, pointed to one terrifying, undeniable conclusion. A serial killer was on the loose, operating in the shadows, preying on the vulnerable. Can you even begin to fathom the terror that must have seized the community? The growing dread, the chilling realization that a monster was walking among them. If you lived in the area during that time, what would have been your thoughts, your fears? How would you have coped with that constant, gnawing fear? Let's engage in a dialogue about this in the comments. Your insights are valuable. The Killer's Blueprint. Unveiling the modus operandi. As the investigation painstakingly progressed, a chilling pattern, a macabre signature of the killer, began to crystallize. The victims were predominantly young women, many of whom were involved in prostitution or were runaways, individuals often living on the fringes of society. This deliberate targeting of vulnerable individuals is a hallmark, a recurring theme often observed in serial killer cases. What do you think this calculated choice of victims reveals about the killer's psychology, his motivations, his inner demons? I'm eager to hear your theories and interpretations in the comments below. The method of killing was also disturbingly consistent. Strangulation, a deeply personal and brutal form of homicide. Furthermore, there was evidence of sexual assault in a significant number of the cases. This chilling combination of strangulation and sexual violence paints a disturbing portrait of the killer's motives, his insatiable need for control, dominance, and a twisted sense of power. Assembling the forces, the Green River Task Force, and the initial suspects, the sheer number of victims, the horrifying similarities in their deaths, and the escalating public outcry led to the formation of the Green River Task Force, a dedicated assembly of investigators drawn from various agencies, most notably the King County Sheriff's Office. This was a monumental undertaking, one of the most extensive and resource-intensive investigations of its kind at the time. The pressure on these detectives, the weight of expectation, must have been immense, almost unbearable. What strategies? What investigative techniques? Do you envision they employed in those early, crucial days of the investigation? How do you think they prioritized leads, managed the deluge of information, and maintained their focus amidst the mounting pressure? The task force's initial efforts focused on identifying potential suspects, individuals who might have the capacity for such heinous acts. One of the early suspects was Melvin Foster, a cab driver with a documented history of violence against women, particularly prostitutes. However, after rigorous scrutiny and investigation, he was eventually ruled out. This is a critical juncture to remember in any investigation, particularly one as labyrinthine and complex as this. There will inevitably be false leads, dead ends, and frustrating setbacks. It's an inherent part of the investigative process, a reality that law enforcement must grapple with. How do you think these inevitable setbacks affected the morale of the task force members, their determination, and the public's perception of their efforts? Did these early missteps erode public confidence, or did they strengthen the resolve of the investigators? 1983, a year of escalating horror. The body count rises. The year 1983 witnessed a terrifying escalation in the Green River killer's activities. A period marked by an alarming increase in the frequency of his crimes. The bodies continued to surface, each new discovery further, fueling the public's fear, deepening the sense of dread, and intensifying the task force's desperate race against time. Some of the victims discovered during this harrowing year include Carol Christensen, 21, found on May 8, 1983, her life tragically cut short. Martina Authorley, 18, found on May 28, 1983, another name added to the growing list of victims. Debra Estes, 15, found on May 30, 1983, a child, barely a teenager, her life brutally extinguished. Mary Meehan, 22, found on November 10, 1983, the terror showing no signs of abating. Tammy Lyles, 16, found on June 23, 1983. Yet another young life lost to the killer's savagery. Display a graphic, again adhering to YouTube's guidelines, that visually emphasizes the increasing number of victims throughout 1983. The sheer number of victims discovered in 1983 is staggering, almost incomprehensible. It's difficult to fathom that one individual could be responsible for so much death, so much suffering, so much devastation. How do you think this relentless onslaught of violence affected the families of the victims, the people who loved and cared for these women? The constant barrage of news reports, the grim discoveries, the ever-present specter of the killer. It must have been an unending nightmare, a living hell. The Riverman's shadow, Ted Bundy's dubious assistance. In a bizarre and profoundly unsettling twist, the task force, in a move that sparked both intrigue and controversy, sought the assistance of another notorious serial killer, Ted Bundy, who was then languishing on death row in Florida. Bundy, often referred to as the Riverman, himself due to his own predilection for disposing of his victims' bodies in rivers, offered his supposed expertise on the Green River Killer's psychology, his potential motivations, and his possible behavioral patterns. He suggested, among other things, that the killer would likely revisit the dump sites, a behavior exhibited by some serial killers who derive a twisted sense of satisfaction or control from revisiting the scenes of their crimes. This is a fascinating, albeit deeply disturbing, aspect of the case, one that raises numerous ethical and practical questions. What are your thoughts on this highly unorthodox decision to seek advice, to solicit insights from a convicted serial killer in the pursuit of another? Was it a desperate gamble born out of frustration, a stroke of unconventional genius, or something else entirely? Was it morally justifiable? Did the potential benefits outweigh the inherent risks and ethical complexities? Let's delve into this morally ambiguous territory in the comment section. I'm genuinely curious to hear your diverse perspectives. Bundy's involvement, while undoubtedly generating significant media attention and public interest, ultimately failed to yield any concrete, actionable breakthroughs in the case. It did, however, provide some insights, albeit speculative, into the potential mindset, the psychological makeup of the Green River Killer. Bundy's analysis, based on his own twisted understanding of serial predation, suggested that the killer likely felt a sense of ownership, a possessive connection to both the bodies of his victims and the locations where he chose to discard them. 1984, 1987. A lull in the storm are interpreting the shifting patterns. The pace of the killings appeared to exhibit a noticeable deceleration between 1984 and 1987. Fewer bodies were discovered during this period compared to the frenzied activity of 1982 and 1983. This apparent lull in the storm led to a flurry of speculation, a multitude of theories attempting to explain the shift. Had the killer, incarcerated for an unrelated crime, his reign of terror temporarily interrupted? Had he relocated to a different area, extending his hunting grounds beyond the familiar territory of King County? Or, perhaps most chillingly, had he simply become more adept at concealing his crimes, refining his methods, becoming a more efficient predator? What's your interpretation of this apparent lull, this seeming decrease in the frequency of discovered victims? Do you believe it was a deliberate, calculated strategy on the killer's part, a tactical adjustment to evade detection? Or was something else at play, some external factor influencing his actions? I'm eager to hear your hypotheses, your informed speculations. Despite the relative decrease in discovered victims during these years, the Green River Killer was far from finished, his bloodlust far from satiated. During this period, the following victims, among others, were found their lives tragically added to the killer's grim Taulig Cheryl Wims 18, found on March 22, 1984. A reminder that the killer was still active. Shonda Summers, 17. Found on August 9, 1984. Another young life extinguished. Rebecca Marrero, 20, whose remains were not identified until 2010, is believed to have been murdered during this time. Her disappearance a haunting mystery for decades. The name emerges. Gary Ridgway enters the spotlight. It's at this juncture, in our chronological exploration, that a name emerges from the shadows. A name that will ultimately become synonymous with the Green River Killer. A name that will forever be etched in the annals of true criming Gary Ridgway. In 1982, following the discovery of Marie Malvar's purse, a seemingly insignificant clue, Ridgway first came under the scrutiny of investigators. His known association with prostitutes, his frequent presence in areas frequented by the victims, and his unsettling demeanor raised red flags. He was even subjected to a polygraph examination in 1984, a test that, to the astonishment of many, he managed to pass. This is a pivotal moment, a turning point that deserves careful consideration. Ridgway, the man who would later be definitively identified and convicted as the Green River Killer, was already on the radar of law enforcement, lurking on the periphery of their investigation. He was questioned, he was scrutinized, he was even tested, and yet he managed to slip through their grasp, to evade capture. How is that even possible? What factors, what circumstances, do you believe contributed to this initial, almost catastrophic failure to identify him as the perpetrator of these heinous crimes? Was it a failure of investigative techniques? A limitation of the available technology? Or something more insidious? A testament to Ridgway's cunning and ability to deceive. Ridgway's ability to successfully navigate the polygraph test is particularly significant, a detail that warrants further examination. It starkly highlights the iron limitations of this technology, its susceptibility to manipulation, and the chilling fact that a seemingly normal, unassuming individual can harbor such dark, deeply buried secrets, can effectively mask their true nature from the world. This is a chilling reminder that evil can often hide in plain sight, that the most dangerous predators can often wear the most convincing masks of normalcy. 1988-1990 Essing. The terror resurges, a killer's unrelenting pursuit. The discovery of Martha Reeves' body in 1988 served as a grim, horrifying confirmation, shattering any lingering illusions, any misplaced hopes that the Green River Killer might have ceased his operations, that he might have moved on or been apprehended for other crimes. He was still out there, still stalking his prey, still indulging his insatiable bloodlust. This chilling realization sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through the community, a renewed sense of vulnerability, and reignited the urgency of the investigation, injecting it with a renewed sense of purpose. Other victims tragically added to the killer's list during this period include Patricia Yellowroad, 38, found August 6, 1998. Marta Reeves, 36, found on September 5, 1990. Patricia Osborne, 19, found on October 20, 1990. By this point, the case, despite the tireless efforts of investigators, had grown considerably cold. The leads had dwindled. The evidence, while substantial, hadn't yielded the definitive breakthrough needed to unmask the killer. Yet, chillingly, the killer remained active, his reign of terror continuing unabated. Even with advancements in forensic science and investigative methodologies, how was he still eluding capture? What were the critical obstacles hindering the investigation? I'm keen to hear your insights on this frustrating period of the case. The DNA dawn. A paradigm shift, hope on the horizon, the 1990s ushered in a groundbreaking, transformative development, a scientific revolution that would irrevocably alter the landscape of criminal investigations and ultimately play a decisive role in the Green River Killer case, the advent of DNA technology. This revolutionary forensic tool offered the unprecedented potential to link biological evidence recovered from crime scenes to specific individuals with an extraordinary degree of accuracy, a level of certainty previously unimaginable. This was a watershed moment, a true game changer in the field of forensic science. For the first time, investigators possessed a truly potent, scientifically irrefutable weapon in their arsenal, a tool that could potentially unlock the secrets held within the vast repository of evidence collected over the years. Do you think the task force immediately grasped the full potential of DNA evidence in this specific case, with its unique challenges and complexities? How quickly, how effectively? Do you imagine they were able to adapt their investigative strategies to integrate this new technology into their existing framework, to apply it to the mountain of evidence they had painstakingly accumulated over the years? A moment of reflectioning. Remembering the victims, the human cost of terror. Before we proceed to the next phase of the investigation, the relentless pursuit, the renewed vigor fueled by the advent of DNA technology, and the eventual, long-awaited capture of the Green River Killer, I want us to pause, to take a collective breath, to engage in a moment of solemn reflection. Take a moment to truly reflect on the sheer magnitude of this tragedy, the profound human cost of this extended reign of terror. We've discussed dozens upon dozens of victims, each one representing a life tragically cut short, a future irrevocably stolen, a void left in the lives of loved ones. We've explored the palpable terror that gripped an entire community for nearly 2 decades, the constant fear, the gnawing uncertainty, the pervasive sense of vulnerability. We've touched upon the tireless, often frustrating, efforts of law enforcement, the near misses, the agonizing setbacks, and their unwavering, resolute determination to bring a monster, a predator, to justice. What has resonated with you the most about the Green River Killer's trail of terror thus far? Which aspect of the case, which detail, which victim's story has struck you the most profoundly? Which element has left the most indelible impression? Share your thoughts, your feelings, your theories, your reflections in the comments below. Let's continue this vital conversation, because it's of paramount importance that we remember these victims, that we strive to comprehend the profound and lasting impact of these horrific crimes, and that we endeavor to learn from the past, to prevent such tragedies from occurring in the future. In the next part, we'll witness the turning of the tide, the resurgence of the investigation, now supercharged by the power of DNA technology, and the eventual, long overdue capture of the man who had eluded justice, who had haunted the Pacific Northwest for so long. Stay tuned, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next installment of this gripping, deeply unsettling true crime saga. We have a lot more to uncover together, a lot more to discuss. What do you think finally led to his capture? What were the key factors that ultimately brought him down? Share your predictions, your insights, your theories in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next part. Part 3, Unmasking the Beast. The hunt for the Green River Killer. We've journeyed through the darkest depths of the Green River Killer's reign of terror. And now, we arrive at a turning point. The investigation, once stalled, is about to be reinvigorated, fueled by a revolutionary scientific breakthrough and an unwavering determination to bring a monster to justice. The DNA revolution. A new era of investigation, the dawn of the 1990s, brought with it a seismic shift in the world of forensic science. The widespread application of DNA technology. This groundbreaking innovation offered a new, incredibly powerful tool for law enforcement. For the first time, investigators could potentially link biological evidence, hair, skin cells, bodily fluids found at crime scenes to specific individuals with an unprecedented degree of accuracy. Imagine the possibilities. Suddenly, cold cases, seemingly unsolvable mysteries, could be revisited with fresh eyes and new hope. In the context of the Green River Killer investigation, this was a game changer. What do you think were the first steps the task force took to utilize this new technology? How did they prioritize the vast amount of evidence collected over the years? Share your thoughts in the comments. The King County Sheriff's Office, recognizing the immense potential of DNA analysis, began to re-examine the evidence that had been meticulously collected and stored throughout the long years of the investigation. This was a monumental task, requiring painstaking cataloging, careful handling, and the development of new protocols for testing and analysis, resurrecting the cold case, the Green River Task Force refocused in 2001. The Green River Task Force was revitalized, its mission renewed, and its focus sharpened by the promise of DNA technology. Detective Dave Reachert, a key figure in the original investigation, played a crucial role in spearheading this renewed effort. He understood the significance of this new scientific tool and was determined to use it to finally bring the Green River Killer to justice. This renewed focus on the case wasn't just about applying new technology. It was about bringing closure to the victims' families, about finally answering the questions that had haunted them for so long. What do you think motivated these investigators to keep fighting, even after so many years? Let's discuss it in the comments. The task force's renewed efforts were also driven by a sense of responsibility to the community, a commitment to ensuring that such a predator would never again be able to terrorize the streets of King County. It was a chance to right a wrong, to deliver justice that had been delayed for far too long. The power of persistency, retesting the evidence. The re-energized Green River Task Force, armed with the power of DNA analysis, embarked on the painstaking process of re-examining the vast trove of evidence that had been collected over the years. This included items recovered from crime scenes, such as clothing, fibers, and other materials that might contain traces of the killer's DNA. One of the key pieces of evidence was semen recovered from several victims. In the original investigation, these samples had yielded limited information, primarily blood type. But with the advent of DNA technology, these same samples now held the potential to unlock the killer's identity. The process of retesting the evidence was complex and time-consuming. It involved extracting DNA from old, often degraded samples, amplifying it to create a usable profile, and then comparing it to known DNA databases. What challenges do you think the forensic scientists faced in working with such old evidence? A breakthrough. The DNA profile emerges. Despite the challenges, the forensic scientists working on the Green River case persevered. And then, a breakthrough. In September 2001, they were able to develop a DNA profile from semen recovered from 3 of the victims: Marcia Chapman, Opal Mills, and Cynthia Hines. This was a monumental achievement, a turning point in the investigation. For the first time, investigators had a concrete, scientific link between these 3 murders. They had a genetic fingerprint of the killer. This was no longer just a theory. It was hard, undeniable evidence. How do you think this breakthrough impacted the morale of the task force? This DNA profile was immediately entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, a national database of DNA profiles from convicted offenders and unsolved crimes. The hope was that it would match an existing profile, leading to the immediate identification of the Green River Killer. The waiting game? No match in CODIS. However, despite the excitement and anticipation, the initial search of code eyes yielded no matches. The Green River Killer's DNA was not in the database. This was a setback. But it didn't diminish the significance of the DNA profile. The absence of a match simply meant that the killer had either not been convicted of a crime that required DNA sampling, or had committed his crimes before such databases were widely used. It didn't mean the investigation was at a dead end. What strategies do you think the task force employed at this point? Knowing they had the killer's DNA, but no match in the database, the task force continued to explore other avenues, including familial DNA searching, a technique that involves looking for partial matches in the database that might indicate a relative of the perpetrator. This was a relatively new and controversial technique at the time, but it held the potential to break the case wide open. Re-examining the suspects, Ridgway comes into focus again with the DNA profile in hand. The task force began to re-examine individuals who had been considered suspects in the past but had been cleared due to lack of evidence. One name that resurfaced prominently was Gary Ridgway. Ridgway, as you'll recall from Part 2, had been questioned early in the investigation due to his suspicious behavior and his connection to areas frequented by the victims. He had even passed a polygraph test in 1984. However, the limitations of polygraph technology were well understood, and the new DNA evidence provided a far more reliable means of either implicating or exonerating him. What do you think were the key factors that led the task force to refocus their attention on Ridgway? What evidence, besides the DNA, might they have reconsidered in light of this new development? The sting obtaining a confirmatory DNA sample from Ridgway in November 2001. Investigators devised a plan to obtain a fresh DNA sample from Ridgway for comparison with the profile developed from the crime scene evidence. They needed a sample that could be definitively linked to him, one that would stand up to the scrutiny of a court of law. Under the guise of needing to discuss an old prostitution case with him, detectives approached Ridgway as he was leaving his job at the Kenworth Truck Company. They obtained a saliva sample from him, ensuring a clear chain of custody. This was a critical moment. How do you think Ridgway reacted when approached by detectives again after all these years? What might have been going through his mind? The sample was rushed to the lab, where forensic scientists worked feverishly to extract and analyze Ridgway's DNA. The entire team understood the gravity of the situation. They were on the verge of potentially identifying one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The match, a moment of truth. On November 30, 2001, the results came in. The DNA profile, developed from Ridgway's saliva sample, matched the profile developed from the semen on Marcia Chapman, Opal Mills, and Cynthia Hines. The match was definitive, a 1 in a trillion probability that it could be anyone else. This was it. After nearly 2 decades, after countless hours of investigation, after years of fear and uncertainty, the Green River Killer had been identified. The evidence was irrefutable. Gary Ridgway was the man responsible for the deaths of at least these 3 women, and likely many more. The news of the DNA match sent shockwaves through the task force, the King County Sheriff's Office, and the entire community. It was a moment of profound relief, a sense that justice, though delayed, would finally be served. How do you think the victims' families reacted to this news? The arrest Ridgway is taken into custody within hours of the DNA match confirmation. Gary Ridgway was arrested as he left the Kenworth truck plant. He was taken into custody without incident, seemingly surprised but not resistant. After nearly 2 decades of operating in the shadows, the Green River Killer's reign of terror was over. The arrest was a watershed moment, a culmination of years of relentless investigation and a testament to the power of forensic science. It was also a moment of profound sadness. A reminder of the countless lives lost and the families forever scarred by Ridgway's horrific crimes. What do you think were Ridgway's thoughts and emotions in those moments after his arrest? What do you imagine was the atmosphere at the King County Sheriff's Office when he was brought in? The confession unraveling the full scope of the horror following his arrest. Ridgway was confronted with the overwhelming DNA evidence against him. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy trial and the potential for the death penalty, he made a calculated decision. He agreed to cooperate with investigators, to confess to his crimes in exchange for a life sentence. This decision set in motion a series of chilling interviews where Ridgway, in a disturbingly calm and matter-of-fact manner, detailed his horrific crimes to the investigators. He led them to the locations where he had disposed of his victims' bodies, helping to recover remains that had eluded discovery for years. These confessions were crucial for several reasons. They provided closure to the families of many victims, confirming their worst fears, but also allowing them to finally know what had happened to their loved ones. They also helped to paint a more complete picture of the Green River Killer's activities, revealing the true scope of his depravity. The plea bargain, avoiding the death penalty in November 2003 as part of a plea agreement designed to avoid the death penalty and to provide closure for as many victims' families as possible. Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. He admitted to killing 48 women, although he claimed the actual number was closer to 71. He was later convicted of a 49th. The plea bargain was a controversial decision, one that sparked heated debate. Some argued that Ridgway deserved the death penalty for his horrific crimes, while others believed that securing his cooperation in locating additional remains and providing closure to families was more important. What's your important? What is your opinion on this plea bargain? Was it a just outcome, or should Ridgway have faced the death penalty? Share your thoughts in the comments. The plea bargain ensured that Ridgway would spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of parole. It also meant that he would be required to continue cooperating with investigators, providing information about any additional victims he might have had. The sentencing, facing the consequences, on December 18, 2003, Gary Ridgway was formally sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, he was confronted by the families of his victims, who were given the opportunity to address him directly, to express their pain, their anger, and their grief. This was an incredibly powerful and emotional moment, a chance for the families to finally confront the man who had caused them so much suffering. It was also a moment for Ridgway to face the consequences of his actions, to hear firsthand the devastating impact of his crimes. What do you think were the most important aspects of this sentencing hearing? How do you think it affected the victims' families and Ridgway himself? The aftermath, continuing the search and remembering the victims following Ridgway's conviction, investigators continued their efforts to identify additional victims and to locate their remains. Ridgway himself provided information that led to the discovery of several more sets of remains, although some victims remain unidentified to this day. The Green River Killer case left an indelible mark on the Pacific Northwest and on the nation as a whole. It was a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals, and of the importance of vigilance and persistence in the face of evil. It is crucial that we remember the victims of the Green River Killer, that we honor their memory and acknowledge the profound impact of these crimes on their families and on the community. Their stories should never be forgotten. Reflecting on the investigation, lessons learned, the Green River Killer investigation was one of the longest and most complex serial killer investigations in American history. It spanned nearly 2 decades, involved countless law enforcement personnel, and ultimately relied on groundbreaking advances in forensic science to bring the perpetrator to justice. The case offers numerous lessons for law enforcement, forensic scientists, and the public. It highlights the importance of persistence, collaboration, and the willingness to embrace new technologies in solving complex crimes. It also underscores the need for compassion and understanding in dealing with the victims of violent crime and their families. What do you think are the most important lessons to be learned from the Green River Killer case? How can these lessons be applied to future investigations? Conclusioning. the end of a reign of terror, the unmasking and conviction of Gary Ridgway as the Green River Killer marked the end of terrifying chapter in American criminal history. It was a victory for justice, a testament to the power of perseverance, and a tribute to the memory of the victims. But the story doesn't end there. The Green River Killer case continues to be studied by criminologists, psychologists, and law enforcement professionals who seek to understand the motivations of serial killers, to improve investigative techniques, and to prevent future tragedies. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the investigation of the Green River Killer. It's a story that is both disturbing and compelling, one that raises profound questions about the nature of evil, the resilience of the human spirit, and the pursuit of justice. What are your final thoughts on this case? What lingering questions do you have? Share your reflections in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime content. Your engagement helps to keep these important stories alive. Remember to be respectful of the victims and their stories in the comments. Part 4. Inside the Mind of a Monster. Profiling the Green River Killer. We've journeyed through the investigation, witnessed the capture, and examined the crimes of the Green River Killer. Now, we turn our attention to the most complex and perhaps the most unsettling question. What drove Gary Ridgway to commit such horrific acts? In this section, we'll delve into the field of criminal psychology, attempting to understand the inner workings of a serial killer's mind. The nature V's, nurture debating, unraveling the roots of violence. When confronted with acts of extreme violence, the age-old question inevitably arises: was Gary Ridgway born with a predisposition toward such brutality? Or was he shaped into a monster by his environment and experiences? This is the classic nature versus nurture debate, a fundamental question in the field of psychology and criminology. On the nature side, some theories suggest that certain individuals may have a genetic predisposition towards violence. There might be neurological factors at play, such as abnormalities in brain structures associated with empathy, impulse control, and aggression. Could Ridgway have possessed such biological predispositions that made him more susceptible to developing violent tendencies? While we can't definitively answer this without a thorough neurological examination, which wasn't possible, it's a factor to consider. On the nurture side, we must consider the profound impact of early childhood experiences, environmental factors, and social influences. What role might these factors have played in shaping Ridgway's psychological development, potentially setting him on a path towards violence? Ridgway's early life egg. Searching for clues in the formative years. To understand Ridgway's psychological makeup, we must carefully examine his early life, searching for clues that might shed light on his later actions. Gary Ridgway was born in 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. His family was seemingly ordinary, a working-class family like many others. However, beneath the surface of normalcy, there were undercurrents of dysfunction. His childhood was not without its complexities. Reports suggest a strained and turbulent relationship with his mother, who has been described as domineering, controlling, and perhaps even emotionally abusive. There were also accounts of witnessing frequent and intense domestic disputes between his parents. These experiences, particularly during the formative years, could have had a significant impact on his emotional and psychological development. How significant do you think these early childhood experiences were in shaping Ridgway's personality and his later behavior? Could they have planted the seeds of his violent tendencies, fostering resentment, anger, and a distorted view of relationships, particularly with women? Furthermore, Ridgway reportedly exhibited some concerning behaviors during his childhood, including cruelty to animals and an obsession with fire, setting small fires on multiple occasions. These are often considered red flags, early warning signs of potential psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies. They suggest a lack of empathy, a disregard for the suffering of others, and a fascination with destruction. What do these behaviors suggest about his early psychological development, about his capacity for empathy, and his respect for boundaries? The psychopath's masked deception, manipulation, and a double life. One of the most chilling and perplexing aspects of Gary Ridgway's case is his apparent ability to lead a double life, to compartmentalize his existence. He was married multiple times, held a steady job as a truck painter for 3 decades, and presented himself to the world as a relatively normal, unremarkable individual. Yet, beneath this facade of normalcy, concealed behind this carefully constructed mask, lurked a monster, a predator who stalked and killed vulnerable women for nearly 2 decades. This ability to compartmentalize, to seamlessly separate his horrific crimes from his everyday life, is a hallmark of psychopathy. Psychopaths are often described as master manipulators, highly skilled at deception, and able to present a charming or innocuous exterior to the world while harboring dark, violent impulses and a complete disregard for others. Ridgway's success in maintaining this double life for so long is a testament to his manipulative abilities. He was able to deceive his wives, his colleagues, and his neighbors, hiding his true nature from those around him. How do you think Ridgway was able to maintain this double life for so long, effectively concealing his monstrous acts from those closest to him? What does this ability to deceive and manipulate reveal about his psychological makeup, his intelligence, and his understanding of social norms? The role of fantasizing, fueling the killer's drive and shaping his crimes. In many serial killer cases, fantasy plays a crucial, often driving role. These individuals often develop elaborate, violent fantasies that they then seek to act out in reality, transforming their dark imaginings into horrific acts. For Ridgway, these fantasies likely revolved around themes of power, control, domination, and sexual violence. His choice of victims, primarily sex workers and runaways, individuals often marginalized and vulnerable, suggests a desire to dominate and control those he perceived as easy targets, as less likely to be missed or to have their disappearances vigorously investigated. The act of strangulation, a highly personal and intimate form of killing, further reinforces this need for control, allowing the killer to exert ultimate power over his victims, to feel their life slipping away under his control. What do you think were the specific elements, the intricate details of Ridgway's fantasies? How did these fantasies evolve over time? How did they fuel his desire to kill, pushing him from dark imaginings to horrific reality? Sexual sadism, a core component of Ridgway's crimes and pathology. The evidence in the Green River killer case strongly suggests the presence of sexual sadism in Ridgway's psychological makeup. Sexual sadism is a paraphilic disorder characterized by deriving sexual gratification from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation on others. It's a deeply disturbing pathology, one that combines sexual arousal with violence and cruelty. The sexual assault of his victims, often performed post-mortem, coupled with the act of strangulation, points towards a deep, seated need to inflict pain and exert control in a sexual context. This is a deeply disturbing aspect of the case, one that highlights the darkest corners of human psychology and the terrifying potential for cruelty that can reside within some individuals. How does the element of sexual sadism further our understanding of Ridgway's motivations? What does it reveal about the nature of his desires, the source of his gratification, and the twisted connection between sex and violence in his mind? The lack of empathy, a defining trait of the psychopathic mind, one of the defining characteristics of psychopathy, and a trait that appears to be central to Ridgway's psychological profile, is a profound lack of empathy. This is the inability to understand or share the feelings of others, to put oneself in another person's shoes and experience the world from their perspective. Ridgway's cold, detached demeanor during his confessions, his matter-of-fact recounting of horrific acts, and his apparent lack of remorse all point towards a fundamental inability to empathize with his victims. He viewed them not as human beings with lives, loved ones, hopes, and dreams, but as objects, as mere instruments for his own gratification, as disposable entities. How significant is this lack of empathy in understanding Ridgway's crimes? Is it the key factor, the core deficit, that enabled him to kill so many people without remorse, without being haunted by his actions? The power and control dynamic, a driving force behind the violence. The need for power and control appears to be a central theme, a driving force. In the Green River Killer case, this is evident in Ridgway's choice of victims, his method of killing, and his overall approach to his crimes. He sought out individuals he perceived as vulnerable, as easy to overpower and control. By targeting vulnerable women, often those involved in prostitution or living on the streets, Ridgway was selecting individuals over whom he could easily exert power, both physically and psychologically. The act of strangulation itself is a powerful demonstration of control, a physical act that allows the killer to dominate and ultimately extinguish the life of another human being, to hold their fate in his hands. Furthermore, Ridgway's practice of revisiting the dump sites, as suggested by Ted Bundy's analysis and confirmed by Ridgway himself, could be interpreted as a way of maintaining a sense of ownership and control over his victims, even after their deaths. It was a way of reliving his crimes, of savoring the power he felt in those moments, the banality of evil, the ordinary face of a monster. One of the most unsettling and counterintuitive aspects of the Green River Killer case is the stark contrast between Ridgway's seemingly ordinary, unremarkable life and the extraordinary horror of his crimes. This concept is often referred to as the banality of evil, a term coined by philosopher Hannah Arendt to describe how seemingly normal, even mundane individuals can commit atrocious acts. Ridgway's ability to blend into society, to hold down a steady job, to maintain relationships, to be a seemingly average member of the community, all while harboring a dark, secret life as a serial killer, challenges our preconceived notions about what a monster looks like. It forces us to confront the disturbing reality that evil can often reside behind the most unassuming facades, that the greatest threats may not be readily apparent. The unanswerable questions, though, the limits of psychological understanding. Despite our best efforts to analyze Ridgway's psychology, to dissect his motivations, and to understand the complex interplay of factors that drove him to kill, many questions remain unanswered. The human, the mind, particularly one as twisted and complex as Ridgway's, is a difficult realm to fully comprehend. The motivations of a serial killer, the intricate workings of their inner world, may never be fully understood, even with the most sophisticated psychological tools. We can identify patterns, we can analyze behaviors, we can develop theories, and we can draw inferences. But ultimately, the precise reasons why Gary Ridgway became the Green River Killer, the specific triggers that pushed him over the edge, may forever remain elusive, locked within the recesses of his own mind. Part 5 Conclusion. A legacy of lessons. The Green River Killer case stands as a chilling testament to the darkness that can reside within seemingly ordinary individuals and the enduring impact such evil has on victims, their families, and entire communities. While Gary Ridgway's reign of terror has ended, the lessons learned from this decade's long investigation continue to inform and shape law enforcement practices, forensic science, and our understanding of criminal psychology. His capture brought a measure of justice and closure, but the scars remain, a reminder of the need for vigilance and the importance of pursuing justice, no matter how long it takes. The memory of the victims must endure, and we should strive to learn from this tragedy to help prevent similar horrors in the future. Thank you for joining me on this in-depth exploration of the Green River Killer case. I hope it's provided valuable insight into the complexities of criminal investigations and the dark realities of the human psyche. If you found this video informative, please like and share it with others who might be interested. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. Your support helps to continue these important discussions.